everyone. I'm Ari here with Rachel, and we're your hosts for the Merry Writer podcast. This week, we're on episode 229, and we're asking, should your book include spice? Before we dive into the topic, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening if you haven't already. And if you enjoy the show, please share it with friends and feel free to write a review. Okay, obviously, whenever we ask one of these kind of questions, the main answer is simply, if you want to. Should you include spice in your book? If you want to. Go ahead, throw it in. But if that was the only thing we said, then this episode would be hella short. And it probably should be, but I've made a lot of notes. So it's actually going to be quite long. I'm just going to throw in a quick caveat. I love my caveats. These are just our personal thoughts and opinions. Please do not come at us with pitchfork and torches. We know that the topic of adding spice or not adding spice to a book can sometimes be controversial, apparently, especially if you spend any time on social media. So yeah, just want to get that in there.
Yeah, I just want to add that, I mean, I can't speak for Ari, but for me personally, I am not 100% a huge fan of spice. I don't mind reading a little bit of it, but sometimes when the book, it's just like dominated by spice, but it's not considered erotica, like that kind of, there's like a fine line between including spice and not including spice. And that's kind of what we're going to be talking about in this episode, because it's such a huge trend now to include spice in your books, whether it's romantic or not. And sometimes if your book doesn't warrant it, you don't have to go along with the trends. So that's just kind of what we're touching upon here. But I do agree with Ari. If you want to include spice, include spice. This is just our opinions. So Ari, take it away.
Yeah, that's it. We're not here to shame anybody. Maybe. No, this is just a discussion on, as Rich said, a bit of the trending of it and just some thoughts about it. You know, in case you're new to writing and you want to add spice, you don't want to add spice, that's kind of where we're going, I think. I don't know. I wrote a lot of notes. I haven't read them since I wrote them.
I haven't read them at all. I told Ari, I was like, I'll just let her read them to me.
You're learning about it for the first time.
We're all in this together, guys. We don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, we never read each other's notes. It's always quite fun like that. Throughout this episode, we will be referring to a spice chart. And I say a spice chart because I've seen several different ones. If you don't know what that is, spice charts can be different, and it literally tells you the different levels of spice. You've got, like, you know, the light spice to the heavy spice. I don't like using those terms, but we're going to stick with it for the time being. But yeah, so if you don't know that there are spice charts, because readers like different levels of things like spice and violence, so charts sort of became a thing to give people an idea of what to expect in a book. Okay, I'll talk about that a bit more, but another quick point. If I remember, I will try and throw up in the YouTube video an image of one of the spice charts. As I said, there are a few different ones, different levels, but it'll give you a vague idea of what it is like. But yeah, when I ever think about spice, one of the main things I think about is that you should consider your audience. And if you aren't aware of your audience and that writers should know who their target audience is, then we will link the episode where we talked about that, because we talked about target audience, we talked about ideal readers. I'm almost sure we did those episodes. So I'll try and make sure to add those links, because it's important to know who your main audience is, because it will give you an idea of whether spice will work for the story and the audience or not. Now, it doesn't say you don't have to add it, because again, you can't hit every point for every person, but there are some obvious ones. For example, if you're writing middle grade books or younger, then spice shouldn't really be in there. I'd like to hope that's a givens. Okay, I hope that's not controversial. So yeah, so there is a point about audiences and things like that. Obviously, that's an obvious one, I hope, but yeah, I have no idea how to end that, so I'm going to stop.
And obviously, when it comes to like middle grade and young adults, we all know that teenagers and preteens, they're coming into their own and they're figuring out their sexuality because they're going through puberty and whatnot. But it's kind of a tricky situation. Like, I personally don't think any spice should be in books for that target audience, but we do know that age group experiments and things like that. But if you are going to show that, like, if that is a main theme of your book and they're coming into their own and figuring out their sexuality, then the spice level should be very, very low. You shouldn't have to go into like too much detail about it, and just like bare minimum detail just to get the point across. And that's it. I don't, no heavy spice. I think the spice level that Ari was talking about, are you talking about like the picture with the peppers?
Yes, it can be peppers, it can be hearts with fire around them, it can be little flame things, but yeah.
Oh, I haven't seen those. I've only seen the peppers.
All right. That makes sense because spicy peppers, that makes more sense.
Yes, yeah. So if you're gonna write like for that audience, the spice level should be like a half-eaten pepper. That's it. That's all I gotta say about that.
That's a good point. So with that in mind, we're just going to run through a basic spice chart just to give you some clarification on some of these levels. So the first one you've got is usually your no spice. That is also known as clean and wholesome. That is your no sex, not even a fade to black, nothing behind closed doors. There just isn't that level of intimacy suggested at all. That's your clean book. I don't know why they call it clean. It suggests that the opposite is dirty, but we'll skip right over that. Next one is your sweet/flirty spice level. And while that can be obviously in any book, same with the clean and wholesome, YA usually falls into this level. Like Rachel said, this is your teen romance, your attraction, usually stops at kissing or sometimes clinching, but there's very little intimacy beyond that and almost nothing on the page because these are teenagers. Remember, a lot of YA, while read by adults, because I know there's a big push with adults reading YA, and there's nothing wrong with that, it's still mainly aimed at teenagers and younger teenagers. That's why the spice levels are usually at sweet and flirty. I just love that. Sweet and flirty. Okay, so we move to next one, which is your fade to black/low sensuality. This means nothing spicy on the page. It's usually your meet cutes. You often get this in the more contemporary romances and things where it's simple intimacy, maybe a couple of steps above sweet and flirty, but nothing hot and heavy. And if anything does happen or suggests that it's going to happen, you fade to black, like, and the door closed kind of thing. And then we move on to the next chapter and it's the next day or whatever. After that, you've got your medium sensuality slash spice. Medium sensuality, I can't say that very well, medium sensuality slash spicy. I'm getting caught up on my own tongue. I shouldn't talk about that. This is where your story, are you okay, Rachel? You're going red.
Well, you said you were, well, I was laughing at you because you were flubbing over your words, and then you said I'm getting caught over my own tongue, and then you made the I shouldn't say that, so it clicked it because I didn't think anything of it.
Gotta get those jokes in.
Oh my god.
I forgot where I am now.
Sensuality slash spicy.
Maybe you should be reading it because I can't say that.
Boom. Done.
Okay, this is where things get a little hotter. This is where your story might have sex and foreplay. Remember that word, foreplay? Doesn't make a point of that. Usually has limited description when the scenes get intimate, but it will have more extreme parts that might fade to black rather than a play-by-play all the way through the scene, I think. Next, you've got high sensuality and erotic romance. This includes sex scenes which can be highly spicy, but often not explicit. Usually this level refers to languages and extreme activities, and the scene will be a complete scene, no fade to black parts, so it will have a play-by-play, and it will be laid out beginning to end. Then we move to the, hot, very hot, explicit slash erotica, which is your sex scenes. There are very rarely euphemisms, nothing to soften the act. The scenes might push sexual boundaries, they might go into more detail of the intimate activities, and can sometimes include less healthy sexual content, which obviously can happen through any of those levels, but it usually seems to be within the hottest level, if we're going by the spice level, where that happens.
Well, those are also more subtle in like the lighter levels. The lighter levels, does that make sense? The less levels, less spicy, less hot level. I am not qualified for this episode.
I think lighter. Maybe we should have made a guest episode and bring somebody on.
I know, really, we probably should have. I just want to say that for me, my level would be the like fade to black, low sensuality, or the medium sensuality slash spicy. I would prefer the fade to black. But if it goes like one step further, I can handle that. Anything higher than that, you lost me. And I have like zero interest in reading more. Not that it's a bad thing, just not for me.
No, because in the end, it's what the writer wants to do, it's what the readers want, and obviously different readers will want different things, different writers will want different things. There are a lot of writers that just they stick to the clean and wholesome or the sweet and flirty. Others will go straight down to the explicit, whatever. I mean, I like the fade to black. I like the medium spicy. I also like the high sensuality. I don't want to go higher than that, but that's my preference. I also don't like it if it's straight in the first book either, especially if it's right at the beginning of the first book. I am very much a slow burn, especially if it's a series. I want a couple of books before something kicks in, because I was brought up with X-Files. Will they, won't they? And you kind of need that slow burn. You know, things get drawn out and it's not straight away. Looking at you, Game of Thrones.
Yeah, no, I agree with that though. I don't want anything to happen like immediately. That's just, I agree. I want the slow burn.
But that's it. I mean, those were just our personal preferences. Everyone else will have different ones. But the whole point of the spice chart is to help writers to understand what readers might be expecting. And I've seen quite a few times where writers will actually put a spice chart at the beginning of their book. And if it's online and they're doing their marketing, they will put the spice chart. You know, when they do the cover reveal, they'll put the spice chart in there because it just lets people know this has got fade to black. This has got very explicit. This is medium. And it just allows readers to have an informed choice about what sort of content they can have. Think of it like with movie, can't think of the word, certifications, where it's like, you know, it's an 18, it's an X. You kind of know if you're watching a horror or an action and it's an 18, it's going to be a lot bloodier and more violent than if it's a 12. I don't watch horrors that are 18 and above because I know it's going to be too much with the violence and the blood. Yeah, so it's similar to that. The spicing just helps to give people an informed idea of what might be in the book. I have to find my notes because I've forgotten where I'm going. Right, so hopefully that gives you some idea of spice level. So you need to then think about what spice is adding to your story. Now, it might just be that you really love spice, your readers really love spice, and you just want to put it in. It might be that you are not interested in that at all. Your readers do not want it. You're not going to put it in, or something in the middle. But it can help to have an idea of why the spice is in there, just like why violence is in there, why other aspects are, because it can ruin a good book if you throw spice in and it wasn't planned, if it's an afterthought. Same with violence or anything like that.
It's just like any other feature in a book. Everything that you put inside your story has to have a purpose. It's that simple, that hard, and that easy at the same time.
Yeah, and I think sometimes when things are trending like spice, it can end up being people think, oh, well, these books did really well and they were really heavily spicy, so I'll put spice in, and they'll sort of like crowbar it in. And it's like, if you decide that you want to chase a certain trend, or you're looking at books and they have something that you think will make your book sell the same way, it's better to go back and look at your outline and look at your plot and your arcs, and then think about it rather than just going, I'm going to shove a sexy right in the middle, because it can mess it up. Same with if you're not planning it. That's all I'm saying. Just plan. Think about story development. Does it move the story? Does it show character development? Does it have an arc of its own? Does it help with the revenge or the betrayal? Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, I think that's where I was going with that. And as Rachel said, you know, there is a trend, and it does seem to be a push that spice is in almost every new adult book and above these days. And the truth is, not every reader wants it. Lots of people don't want spice and will leave a book if it's got it. Other people want that and will avoid books that don't have it, you know, that have just the soft, happily ever afters, no stressful moments, no heavy spice, no extreme violence, which again is all about your target audience. You know, no one's saying you have to do this. I mean, I've had authors that I loved and I've read their books of series, and then they pivoted from regular stories to having like explicit spice further on, and it felt like it came out of left field. And it was like, wow, there doesn't even feel like there's a plot anymore. It just feels like I got dropped into a porno. It's just, sometimes people go, well, that's what I really enjoy writing, and that's what some of my audience like, and that's what they went. And I just stopped reading. So it's just something to think about. Again, I keep saying that because I just want to make sure that we're not telling you not to do anything. Obviously, we never do that on this podcast.
No, not at all. But I mean, that's kind of part of the thing, is that spice level has become such a huge marketing tactic now. I cannot tell you how many times I've been scrolling through Instagram Reels and I've seen authors, romance authors, erotica authors, or any other genre, and they talk about how much spice is in the book, and they make it such a huge point because adding spice is now a trend. And I have an unpopular opinion. I do not care to write to market. I don't write to the trends. if that's what you do and it works for you and you want to do that, then absolutely. But for me personally, I really don't care about that. And if authors start hopping on trends for the sake of trends, doesn't matter how well they write their books. I'm just kind of like, I would prefer you write what you want. But also, I come across many other authors on my Instagram reels where they're writing a romance book or any other book, and they make it a huge point to say that this is a romance without spice, because there are still readers out there that just want that clean, wholesome rom-com, or I mean, it doesn't necessarily need to be rom-com, but like just a generic romantic story, and that's it. So it's actually kind of funny how spice has become such a huge topic in novels.
Exactly. It has become a thing. And I think what worries me is, are there writers out there who were happy to not include spice or to keep it at low levels, you know, your fade to black, your low level intimacy, and now they're feeling like, wow, if you look, especially if you look on certain social medias, it almost feels like everyone's got spice in the book. Everybody wants to read spice. That's what they're aiming like. What's the spice level? What's the spice level? And are there new writers coming out thinking, oh wow, if I want to do well, I need to have it. If I want to do well, I need to have the most explicit stuff. I need to push those boundaries and do that. One of the reasons we did this podcast episode is to say it doesn't have to. There's an audience for every book, whether it's explicit, whether it's not, whether it's in the middle, whether it's not. And yeah, it's a trend. So it's up to you whether you choose that trend. But just be aware that when you choose any form of trend, some people want that book and some people will want that book. And I think the main thing to do is to tell people. That's why I actually am okay with the idea of people having the spice rack. Spice rack.
No, that's good. I like that. Spice rack. You can have different type of peppers, because there's sweet peppers, there's bell peppers, there's jalapeno peppers, there's ghost peppers. Yes.
Other than the sweet like bell peppers, I don't like pepper.
I don't either. I only like the sweet peppers, but still.
Feels like it's turned into a cooking episode. Anyway, yeah, having the spice chart in your book, it's giving people the information, because the worst thing you can do is not tell anyone what the spice level is. Market a book in a certain way that people think, oh wow, it's the same as this book, so I'm assuming it's got lots of spice, or oh, it's the same as these books, I'm assuming it's got no spice, and then those people be surprisingly or unhappily shocked and then leave you on a negative review. Because I've seen that. I've seen negative reviews that say there was no spice, and some that said it was very explicit, especially with the language, which obviously means it was the hottest spice level. So whenever we talk about this, it's all about trying to make sure that you're hitting the right audience, because you don't want to hit the wrong audience and get those negative reviews because somebody picked your book thinking, oh, it's going to have spice because you compared it to 3 other books that had extreme spice and yours doesn't. Or you compared it to, 3 other books that had no spice and you went all in with the heaviest of spices.
Heaviest of spices? The spiciest of spices.
That's it, spiciest of spices.
And I just want to add that if you're writing a book with any amount of spice in it and you're questioning, should I add a spice level chart thingy at the front of the book? The answer is probably yes. If you're thinking that you might need it and you're wondering if you should add it, then you should probably add it. Because I cannot tell you how many times I've been on Goodreads or something and I've been looking through reviews of a book and I've seen reviewers add the spice level to their reviews to let potential readers know the spice level. And I've seen different reviewers have different spice levels because everybody interprets these things differently. So somebody might think, oh, this is pretty low spice, but to somebody else, they're like, whoa, this was too much spice. The levels are kind of all over the place. So you as the author, you're the one who knows just exactly how much spice, and you can say this is a ghost pepper because this includes this, and this, and doesn't necessarily need to be like a trigger warning per se, but just if you think that you should give your audience a little inkling on what to expect for the spice level, then yeah, please add that because it would help a lot, especially for potential readers and reviewers.
Yeah, exactly. I said it's probably not a trigger warning, but it would be a content warning. Not even a warning, I suppose, but just a content information because it would help. And you'll be surprised how many people do look out for that these days. I think that's why it is becoming something that you see online where people tell, oh, well, this is what my level is. This is the level. And some of them will say, this is the level I'm at, and this is what it includes. And they will state some of the things. Where the hell am I going with this episode? There's one other thing I wanted to mention, and this may be controversial, and I hate that it might be controversial. I would like to talk about healthy spice. Now, I am not here to crap on anybody's preference regarding spice. Or maybe I am. I don't know. I'm kind of in a bit of a belligerent mood today, so. But my personal experience is to consider whether the spice you're adding is healthy, or does it perpetuate toxic relationships? Because there's already enough of that shit out there. Obviously, if you are specifically writing about a relationship that is toxic, such as possessiveness, controlling, violent, pushing consent boundaries, etc., well, that's different because you're talking about that is part of the story. However, if you are hawking your story as a romance and it's full of what could be considered unhealthy aspects like possessiveness, extreme jealousy, controlling and isolating behavior, pushing those consent boundaries and such things, you might want to think about that. Okay? That's just a thought. Just my 2 cents. Obviously, you can ignore it, but yeah, I just felt I needed to say that because I've read some stuff and it's questionable.
I agree with that. As somebody who has been in a toxic relationship, sometimes reading the glorification of it in these novels, it's kind of hard. And granted, I, as the reader, can choose just not to read it. It's not for me, but it is kind of difficult to see. I'm going to say the word again, the glorification of it, because that's the only word I can think of right now. Now, obviously, we're talking about like fiction and novel writing and things like that. If you're writing a memoir, for example, and you're reminiscing about what you went through when you're trying to educate people, that's a whole nother thing. It's completely different. But like in fiction writing, just you got to be mindful of the message that you're giving off versus the message that you want your readers to receive. Because even though it's fiction and it's, quote unquote fake, your readers are still learning something from it and they're still perceiving it as something and they're still getting something out of it. So you need to keep that in mind.
Yeah, that's it. And yeah, we could get a lot of people coming at us for that because people get very cranky.
Again, differing of opinion.
Exactly. We're just putting our thoughts out there. You don't have to listen to anything we say. You certainly don't have to take anything we say. Just hope to sprinkle some, I won't even say wisdom. I'm not old enough to have wisdom. Thoughts, just more thoughts. Maybe this is why the podcast doesn't grow as well. We keep telling people to stop.
I mean, I was just going to say, we tell people all the time, don't actually listen to our advice.
No, we were talking about the fact we should probably rename it as like the Miserable Writers podcast.
We're not as merry as we make it out to be. The Miserable Writer or the Ranty Writer, whichever has the best ring to it.
I think the Ranty Writer is a good one. Okay, with that said, do whatever the hell you want to do with your book. Just think about it. Okay, well, let's just turn it over to you guys. Let's end this episode. Do you like to add spice to your writing, or do you prefer not to add spice to your writing? What is your typical spice level that you write and or read? Let us know. Let's talk about it in the comments. Remember, we do release new episodes every Wednesday. Next week, we're discussing using Gantt charts to help your writing process. To ensure you don't miss it, do hit the subscribe button on your way out. And as always, thanks for listening to the Merry Writer Podcast. See you next week. This podcast is brought to you by Sticky Notes. Our walls are covered. The music, titled Inspired, is by Kevin MacLeod, licensed under Creative Commons 4.0.